It's Wednesday, the 8th of July. This is BBC Radio 4. As we see bigger reductions in imports and laws on livestock farming relaxed, we look to see how farmers around the country are coping. Today, on the food programme, Jane Curious talks to Mike Feed, an urban farmer in South East London, to find out what types of meat city folk should be eating. In a brief interview, Mike shows Jane around the urban protein farm and explains why carbon neutral farming in the city is the way forward. With little or no food miles and a healthier choice in meat and fish, can city folk be persuaded to incorporate new sources of protein into their diets?
I'm stood in what used to be a car garage under the arch of a railway bridge. Well lit, airy and surprisingly big, this room has now been converted into an indoor hydroponics and fish farm. At the back of the arch is a rather large outdoor area, home to 8 rabbits, 4 ducks and 3 goats. Today I'm looking around the Urban Protein Farm, one of South East London's first livestock farms, where I'm talking to the owner and urban farmer, Mike Feed. Mike started the farm 2 years ago and has been investigating appropriate fish and animals to be farmed in the city environment. As our need to find more economical farming methods grows, more and more farmers are looking at eco-technology to solve problems encountered since the drastic decline in feed and meat imports. Hi Mike. So, how did this all begin?
Well, I've come from a farming background. My parents owned a dairy farm in Hertfordshire, and in 2008 they fell into a few financial problems as cattle farming became more expensive, and as the value of beef fell. I actually graduated as a graphic designer and lived in London, but I decided to move home and help them out. I did some research and looked at diversifying their business. They now farm free-range goats and llamas. I really enjoyed the more hands-on approach and decided to see what I could do in London. I'd heard of a farm in Dalston where they were growing all sorts in an old shop given to them by the council. They'd used an ancient method of rice farming and applied it to their more updated version using hydroponics. It's basically farming a variety of fish, using the fish's excrement and obtaining the nitrogen from it to fertilise the plants. They use tilapia, fish from the River Nile, as they're the most appropriate fish to farm in small areas because they're not too territorial. It was inspirational, and I took this as the basis for an idea to develop further. I approached Lewisham Council with my idea of keeping livestock in the city, and luckily they liked the idea. They gave me this empty space for a year's trial. I also got a fair bit of help from environmental engineers and urban agriculturalists, and it's only really because of this that I was able to have a reasonably successful first year.
Well, it's an amazing space. You really wouldn't be able to tell that there were animals and fish here from the main road. How did you go about designing the garage?
This garage couldn't have been a more perfect space. I've used the pits in the ground as tanks for my fish, and in them I have tilapia, eels and Malaysian prawns. They're all freshwater fish. They like cooler temperatures and they're not too territorial, which allows more fish to be farmed in a smaller space. And of course they're all very tasty. As for the outdoor livestock, I had to pick animals suitable for cramped city environments, but also animals that would give me a constant supply of produce. They also had to be edible once their life was over. The goats and ducks were perfect for this. I get more than enough milk from the goats, which doesn't have to be homogenized. And actually their milk makes a beautiful selection of cheeses, which I sell onto the local deli. This gives me a reasonable income, and the ducks also give me more than enough eggs. And once you try duck's eggs, it's quite hard to go back to chicken eggs. As for the rabbits, they were a difficult choice. A lot of people don't really like the idea of eating something so cute, but to be honest with you, they couldn't be more perfect to keep. Like the goats, they eat scraps, and they don't make too much of a fuss. And I think their meat's actually quite delicious.
It's an interesting selection of livestock you have. Even if they're suited for the urban environment, it's difficult to get people eating meat they're not too familiar with. Have you ever felt the choice here may be too risky?
As for getting people behind me, it was difficult at first, but when people realise what you're doing is beneficial for the local community and the environment, the taste is already acquired. I'm pretty lucky to have picked goat and tilapia, as there's a big African community in the area, and eels seem to be having an East London revival at the moment. so I get quite a few orders in most weeks, which is great. Obviously, this is something I had to think a lot about before going through with. Luckily, I was given the space for free by the council, so a big chunk of the risk was reduced. But I still did a lot of research. And as well as picking the right animals for the environment, I investigated a lot into animal feed. Picking animals that eat scraps is handy, as I've managed to get a few local restaurants to save their scraps for me. I've even started farming mealworms in the basement, both for human consumption and for the fish. It's all about trying to be as efficient as possible.
Well, it seems like it's a growing idea which shows the possibility of farming in the city. Space is always a problem, but working with what you have and making the most of it, you've made the right choices. It seems to be becoming a success story. Do you have any plans to expand or branch out? I mean, are there any other fish or animals you're looking at farming?
Actually, I have some roof space which isn't suitable for animals because it's a bit too close to the rail lines, but I've been thinking of farming some snails up there. They get pretty big. At the moment I have a few in the garden already, but ideally they need their own space. One of the goats has already managed to munch one of my biggest prize snails. I'm also starting a section on my website with ideas and recipes regarding new protein. People can be unsure about flavours, but hopefully with a bit of guidance they can bring out the best in their food and enjoy a new, better source of protein.
Well, I wish you all the best of luck with your future ventures. I've had an insightful visit to the Urban Protein Farm. It's definitely made me rethink the protein I eat. It's not necessarily about turning vegetarian, it's about making better choices.